Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Bold New Futures Standing Committee meeting. It is very exciting to be here with all of you, and I'm very thankful all of you were able to join us this evening. So we have some very exciting work that we'll do this evening that we're going to embark on. Numerous items on our agenda. I am especially excited to revisit the United We Learn report during breakout sessions. And I believe that there are so many opportunities for us to make positive strides during this meeting tonight. And so thank you all for being here. And I encourage you all to use your voice this evening to engage meaningfully and to really focus in on the importance of what we're doing here. So again, thank you all for being here, and I will now turn things over to Dr. Meredith Brewer, our Director of Education Policy at the Kentucky Department of Education, for approval of our minutes from the last meeting and also for our roll call this evening.
Thanks, Caleb. We'll go ahead and start with the roll call, and then I will put a link in the chat to the minutes from our February meeting for us to approve. So when you hear your name, please unmute and say here. Becky Burgett. Marcia Carmichael Murphy. Michelle Chappell. Heather.
Chappell, and I'm here.
Oh, Chappelle. I apologize. Perfect. Thank you. Heather Dunn. Jim Flynn.
Here.
Hello. Audrey Gilbert. Oh, I summoned her from the void. I think she'll be here shortly. Brooke Gill.
Here.
Shelley Hammonds.
Here.
Jenny Hobson.
Here.
Jessica Jenkins. Carrie Markham. Justin Mitchell. April Mullins-Datko. Arivia Park. Julie Pyle.
Here.
Edna Shack.
Here.
Renee Scott. Oh my, I'm the power that I wield here is pretty impressive. Rose Snell. Whitney Stevenson.
Here.
Great. And I know Bentley is absent today. So Audrey, were you able to join us?
Yes.
Perfect.
No camera today, but my computer restarted and I am in fact here.
Perfect. Great. And Renee?
Yes, I'm here
Perfect.
too.
Okay, wonderful. All right. And we will keep an eye out on anyone who may join us. I'm going to put in the chat a link to the minutes from February. And for this sort of approval process, if you can open the document and just kind of take a look at it as we're sort of working our way through the agenda, I want you to be able to have a chance to look at it. And then at some point before we conclude, if you could approve the minutes by typing approved in the chat, and then I will keep track of that to make sure that we reach our approval percentage that we set as a group. Okay, there's one other announcement that I wanted to share. We are going to be electing a new chair and vice chair for the full council during the month of April. So if you are interested in serving in that role, we would love for you to consider applying. So we actually are going to have an open nomination process. So I'm going to put here in the chat as well a document that sort of outlines the roles and expectations for the chair and vice chair, as well as the nomination form. Should you be interested in either nominating yourself or one of your colleagues. All nominations are due by March 10th. So that nomination form needs to be completed by March 10th. And the elections will be held starting the first week in April through the 17th of April. And then the new chair and vice chair will be announced at the convening at the end of April. So I know that we have Audrey on the call with us. So Audrey, is there anything you would like to say about serving in this role and any encouragement you'd want to provide to anyone considering either nominating themselves or someone to serve as chair?
It's a very fun role. You do have a different perspective on things. You have more meetings to attend for sure, but you do get a different perspective on things and you're able to get kind of a more comprehensive view of the whole council. If you're considering, I would definitely do it. There's no harm in throwing your name in. And if you enjoy the work that we do on this committee, you would definitely enjoy the work of chair and just being able to be involved with everything.
Okay. Anything else, Caleb, that we want to let anyone know during this sort of announcement phase of the meeting?
Nothing comes to mind. I believe we are ready to go ahead and continue working our way on through the agenda.
All right. So that would be me up again. I wanted to provide just a quick overview on kind of the intended deliverables for the CGSA grant. So as you are all aware, the CGSA grant is a competitive grants for state assessment program that is run by the U.S. Department of Education. It's an annual program where they have a call for state level applicants to consider innovative assessment practices, and KDE did apply in cooperation with several external partners, and we're thrilled when we received the news that the application was accepted. And so that provides for $3 million for this work through the year 2026. So it was a 4-year grant that we received in the fall of 22. So we are actually living out that grant right now. That is where sort of the origins of the Cool Council began in our grant application, sort of the expansion of the work that had started with the L3s that you had a chance to interact with during our last meeting. We had several representatives from our local laboratories of learning, but I thought it would be helpful to give sort of an overview of some of the ideas that were laid out in that grant application and some of the products that we proposed would come out of this work. I do think it's important to emphasize that this grant really is focused in innovation and sort of by design will need to be flexible and sort of responsive to the work as it sort of it rolls out. So none of these things are sort of set in stone, but I thought it would be helpful to provide this overview that was actually, I'm going to put another item in the chat, and I apologize for not labeling those, but hopefully you were able to figure out what all these different links were. But the one that I am putting in the chat right now is to a table that we included with our grant application that sort of lays out the 4 years of the grant and then breaks the different kind of components of the grant down and has a sort of delineation of responsibility and sort of proposed deliverables. So, are you able to access that document that I just put in? Do you guys have permissions to view it? I apologize. I will work to make sure that the settings. Can someone? You can see it, perfect, okay. And it is in the Google Drive for the meeting, yes, perfect. Okay, good. Okay, I got a notice that someone needed access, but so within that table, we have the Cool Council as a whole, and you can kind of see in the columns across the top, year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, and then each of the standing committees. A couple points of clarification. So when we originally submitted the grant application, the committees were not named as they are today. That's sort of a good example of how we sort of are, that the work is evolving. So when we originally submitted the grant, we had a standing committee on technical quality, an innovation scaling, and then a policy committee. The technical quality group became the Vibrant Learning Experiences group. The Innovation Scaling became the Accelerating Innovation, and then the policy group became Building a Bold New Future with Communities. And those naming conventions were in alignment with the 3 big ideas. The Cool Council as a whole, you can see in year 4, in bold, there is a proposed deliverable around governance and a sustainable structure for kind of putting into place the 4 habits of co-creation, inclusion, empathy, and reciprocity into how all of the sort of decisions are made within the state around education governance. There's also some unbolded items, and those are sort of the items leading up to kind of the big deliverables, which are in bold. If we go down to the 4th page, which is our committee, you can see, as we've talked about before, a lot of the bolded deliverables, those kinds of products, won't happen until years 3 and 4. But there are some items on there that we already are working toward. Sort of this review of existing state level initiatives. That's something that we've started engaging in, and we know that that opportunity analysis is forthcoming from KnowledgeWorks that we talked about in our last meeting, as well as sort of a report to the full Cool Council on the current landscape. So those kind of are in tandem, this sort of evaluation of what we're doing and where we need to go and what flexibilities districts are asking for. But if you zoom to kind of year 3, you can see that development of that legislative policy agenda. So that would sort of be in preparation for a proposed complete new accountability system for consideration by the General Assembly in 2026. So you can kind of see a little bit of a roadmap of where we're hoping to go. The last page that says HUMRO, that's actually our external evaluator. So our grant did require that we have an external evaluator, and some of you may have had a chance to interact with representatives from HUMRO during the convening. So they're sort of on the periphery watching and thinking through what's happening and providing some sort of reflective questions for us to be thinking on as a group as they will be kind of evaluating at different key points throughout the 4-year grant cycle. There's a lot of information in that table, as has been noted in the chat. It is available in the committee folder, as well as the link in the chat if that link does work for you. But we wanted to just initially hit on this. Happy to answer any questions that people have either now or over email. It's a lot. It's a big grant. Happy to also share our grant application if you're interested. It is definitely not light reading, but if you're interested, I'm happy to put that link in the chat as well, if you want to read the full narrative.
I would, Meredith, I'd just like to say thank you for detailing that there and sharing some information about that with the group. And I know there have been some questions around kind of how this process will unfold and how things will evolve over the course of the next few years. And so I believe that I may have questions as we continue in this work, and we'll email you accordingly. So of course, invite any of our members to do so as well. I think that it's and also it's important for us to be involved as the process continues on. So my mind goes there as well. And by asking questions and thinking through the processes, we do that. So.
And I did see that Edna asked that I put the narrative in the chat, so I'm going to do that now. So it is 100 pages of fun reading for you, Edna. So here you go. Lillian also was one of the co-authors of the grant. So I don't know if there's anything that she wants to add about this process, but I think for any of you who have worked on grants before, there's a lot of sort of thoughtful conjecture, right? Like where we think we're going to go. We have to kind of lay out where the different kind of key phases will be, but as I said, I just want to reiterate, this is an innovative grant. It's about trying out things. And so we will adjust accordingly. So don't feel cemented into what's in the narrative or even what's in that table that I shared with the deliverables. The point is that we're going to be responsive to the needs of the schools and districts who are implementing deep learning, to the members of the council as they're sort of providing feedback. And of course, as we work on sort of sharing about United We Learn in communities, if we're hearing feedback from Kentuckians that they feel like this isn't going in the direction that they support, we'll need to respond and sort of adjust course as well. So it's fluid. However, it is helpful to sort of know some of the frame of what was intended with the grant application. So happy to answer any questions in the future once you've had a chance to kind of digest all of this. But I think with that, I will pitch to Lillian, who can speak to some of this advocacy work that we have coming up in the days ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, speaking of good questions, we've had a lot of good questions, not only about the grant, but also of the role of KnowledgeWorks and some of the other kind of supporting efforts that are starting to bubble up as more and more interest around the Kentucky work emerges. So wanted to just spend 5 quick minutes updating everybody, just doing a little bit of level setting on those pieces. So first, Caleb, in one of his emails, sent around a 1-pager detailing all of the policy deliverables that KnowledgeWorks has been under contract with the Kentucky Department of Education to develop in support of this work. The idea being that we're going to be working on these deliverables. We hope that they are a resource for you. We hope that you can help shape and inform them based on what you need. A lot of these contractual items were developed before we knew we were going to get a CGSA grant and before a lot of this birthed. And so, you know, they were already underway, but we really want to pivot and shift those so that they're in full support of everything that you are creating. So as we think about things like KnowledgeWorks is there as a policy partner to help with policy agendas, we want that to be in full service of the agenda you want to create. So as you're thinking about that 1-pager and the list of resources that KnowledgeWorks support and capacity is there to deliver, we really would love to have your insights as those pieces are shaped so that they serve the needs that you have on the committee. But I wanted to spend the rest of the 5 minutes here focusing on the advocacy work, as Meredith mentioned. So there has been a lot of philanthropic interest in what you guys are doing, because this is really the first time in the nation that you've seen a State Department of Education shift sort of the culture and really empower stakeholders fully to drive a policy agenda and to develop recommendations for reforming and changing assessment and accountability structures. And so we received some interest from the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, and they have decided to invest in the state of Kentucky and actually directly in Kentucky organizations and voices in order to help tell the story about what's happening here in service of trying to convince policymakers that they should embrace the changes that are emerging from the work that you guys are doing. So I'm going to paste in the chat here essentially the goal of this particular investment. So you can see it's really about convening diverse state and local voices who share a commitment to advancing policies that strengthen alignment to local accountability and assessment innovations, with 3 ideas in mind. So first, educating policymakers about these local innovations. So a lot of storytelling. We are going to have to get the stories out from communities in order to convince policymakers in Kentucky that this is not only exciting and compelling, but also impactful and things that they want to start shifting policy systems to align around. We also are going to be focusing on, a messaging strategy. Like I've heard many people say, this is really hard to talk about. Like, what is it we're doing, right? How do you explain what this effort is? How do you explain what we're asking these policymakers to endorse? So we're going to need to get tighter, I think, as a group around that. And lastly, that direct sort of advocacy. How do we take these ideas that the group here develops and really convince policymakers that this is a compelling path forward. Basically, this investment is going to provide additional capacity to a number of Kentucky state and regional organizations to design this strategy alongside the work that's happening in this committee, so that those advocates are ready to carry the policy ideas that are developed here forward. So it's a really, really exciting opportunity. A great way to use those additional dollars to, really tell the story of this work in powerful ways and to get more voices around the state of Kentucky involved in that storytelling work. So excited about that. Also wanted one additional update to share. So last meeting, we got some incredible insights from the L3 communities, the local laboratories of learnings, the districts that are piloting the local innovations around Kentucky, about the policy issues and barriers that they're running up against in their work. And we, as a group, talked about how we might tighten the relationship with those L3 local innovators in this work moving forward. And so a couple updates to share there. So first, the 3 district leaders who shared their insights with us, they went back to the monthly community of practice meeting to share updates about the conversations that they had here. They also shared a message to their colleagues that they also should get in this conversation with us, encouraging more voices to offer to come and attend our meetings and share their insights. So hopefully we'll be able to really lean on a lot of diverse perspectives from that work. They are developing a learning agenda. And so as part of that, they reached out to us to ask what are some of the learning agenda questions that we can have those local leaders focus on as they are beginning to put things together, like the exhibitions that are going to be at our next in-person convening in April. So we're asking them to really center around this continued learning around the policy barriers that they're facing. So that would be a part now of the narrative that they're going to bring forward at the April convening. So that would be really exciting. And to also continue to have that feedback loop with our committee. So wanted to share with you guys that they are open to and eager, I think, to continue to learn alongside us. So as we have learning agenda questions that emerge here, we should very much communicate that to the L3 community. So we have them as an incredible asset in this work. We also ask them to help identify for us stories of impact. So for policymakers, if we're going to do storytelling work, we need to know where the impact is. So what data are they collecting to know that their innovations are working, and how can we bring that data to life in a story? So they're going to be focusing on that for us as well. We also are going to want to look at, as a policy agenda is developing here, how we can bring that policy agenda back for feedback with the L3s. And that might mean that we go to them, so that the burden isn't always on them coming to us, right? We might want some select members here to go and attend the L3 meeting and share the current thinking on that policy agenda and really collect feedback from that group. So there's a lot of incredible opportunities, I think, that are going to merge where we will have great synergy with our local leaders and encourage us to keep thinking about how we maintain that collaboration going forward. Any questions on either of those components?
I don't have a question, a comment. I think the storytelling will be really helpful, especially if we're able to tell the story of the original process for developing the United We Learn report. As I look at the grant, I'm really glad that all the people in this room are here, because I know that you all are committed to this, to the ideas that are in the report, families, communities, and on and on and on, because that will help us keep that in the forefront, even though the grant is primarily focused on assessment and accountability. It's a tough one, and we don't want the tail wagging the dog if we get over focused on the assessment and accountability, we could lose sight of the other pieces. So I really appreciate the storytelling piece, and I appreciate every single one of you sitting in this room. Thank you.
Thanks, Edna. That's a nice comment.
Yeah, and I'll build off of what Dr. Shack said, and I know that you are a fellow Eastern Kentuckian, and I guess in thinking about storytelling, first of all, I will say education storytelling is kind of what I do for a living. So I'm very passionate about getting the stories out from our districts and ensuring that a lot of different stakeholders, a lot of different perspectives are included when that occurs, right? And I think it's important for us to keep that in mind here. Growing up in Eastern Kentucky, though, I learned pretty early on that it's important to own one's narrative, right? And so I think right now, as a group and as a council and as a state, we have a real opportunity to own our narrative. And I'm immensely proud of the work that we've done in Kentucky. And as someone who is relatively new to education advocacy, I'm thankful that the way we're doing things is the only way that I've known things being done, truthfully. I was young for even when this project, this effort started. But to be here now and to see the work we're doing and to see Kentucky climbing the ranks as we do this, it's very exciting. And I do think there's a real story to tell here. I do want to encourage all of our members of this committee and also the council as well at large to think about how we can own our narrative as we move forward. Thank you.
Caleb, I think it's back to you to take us away with the next section. I am done. My quick update is complete.
Thank you, Lillian. And I am very excited for this next element of what we're going to do this evening. And I'll just say briefly that my mind went back to this place as I was thinking out personally a potential plan for advocacy around United We Learn and what this effort might look like. And I've admitted before, and I'll admit here this evening, that thinking about this over the course of 4 years, I tend to be more of an immediate thinker. And so it's interesting to think about how this work will transform and unfold over the next several years. In 2021, in November, in Louisville, Kentucky, the Kentucky Department of Education and the Kentucky Coalition for Advancing Education released the United We Learn: Hearing Kentucky's Voices on the Future of Education report. And I believe that some of us who are members of this committee were involved with the Kentucky Coalition for Advancing Education work. And so we have seen this report now for quite a while. And I also know that there are some of us who maybe are not too familiar with the report. And I think that as we've continued in our progression with United We Learn, we've continued to draw our inspiration from the report because it's based on what stakeholders in Kentucky want from their education system and what they want for their education system. So I am excited to go back to that this evening and to break out into some small groups and talk about the 10 future state goals that are outlined in the report, and to think about how we can ensure our work is aligned with those. And I'm very excited for some great conversation around that. So with that said, I believe we are ready to break out into our groups. I believe that Edna will be leading, Dr. Shack will be leading a group, and then also Audrey will be leading a group. So there will be 3 groups. Hopefully we are all sent to individual groups. I guess we're, let's see here. I guess we're ready to go.
Caleb, do you need some groups created? Three breakout groups?
That is correct. Yes.
John, if you're on, can you help with that? I made you a co-host.
Yep, one.
Thank you. John is a wizard at these things, so he will take care of us.
Thank you so much, John.
Caleb, you said you want 3?
3, that's right. Yes. And if you don't mind, John, Dr. Shack and Audrey will need to be in 2 separate groups, and I won't, I can't be in theirs either, if you don't mind. Thank you.
And Caleb, how long would you like the groups to go for?
That is a really good question. And I'm actually going to draw on Meredith's and Dr. Brewer's advice for that.
I think about 20 minutes, John.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
And Caleb, did you send Edna and Audrey their note catchers already?
I did not. I will
Okay.
forward those on though. Let's see here. Meredith, if you don't mind to remind me here, did you send that document to me through?
I did.
Teams?
So I will, how about I send them their documents because I've got them pulled up. So I will
Okay.
send them to them as private messages. Okay.
Would you be willing to send mine to me as well?
I will. Absolutely. Yes.
I've lost it. Thank you so much.
All right. And Caleb, one more check. You said who needs to be in separate rooms, just so I make sure I've got that set correctly.
So I'll need to be in my room, and
Yep.
then Dr. Shack will need to be in her room, and then Audrey will need to be in her room.
All right. No other requests for rooms?
I think that will be good. Thank you so much, John.
All right. Rooms open.
All right.
Is everyone back? So Caleb, I think I sent you a message. I think that Edna's group actually has a document that Edna prepared that I think that they want to share with the full group. So that's something that we may want to save some time for.
Sorry, I didn't get to finish my sentence, but I think some of you knew in our small group knew where I was going.
Yes.
So Caleb, I think you're actually muted.
I
There
am
you go.
I
There you go.
apologize. I was just making sure that everyone made it back to our main room okay. And it looks like we are good there. So yeah, and actually I'll ask Meredith, and I know that we had with our plans for this discussion, we had talked a lot about diving deep and reflecting on the ideas within the United We Learn report and going back to it. Do you think we have time for some members to share out? Is that?
We do. So I have one comment that I want to share from our group, and then I think we have a couple that wanted to as well, but I do want to save time. So I know people were transitioning back into the room, but Dr. Shack has a document that she's prepared that she shared with her breakout group that if she is willing, I've heard via text chat that it might be beneficial for the whole group to look at it as well. So one comment that I wanted to share that I think we were not surprised to hear, but I do want to share with the group as a whole. There was a request for a crosswalk between the 10 vision statements and the 3 big ideas, and sort of how do those connect and have we perhaps lost some of the vision statements in going to the 3 big ideas? So that is something that Audrey and I plan to, oh, that's Edna's tool. Perfect. Love it a lot. So that's something that we wanted to bring back to the leadership team. So, I mean, what a perfect lead in to Edna's tool. But I do want to open it up to our group that Audrey facilitated if anyone else wants to share anything, and then we'll go to Caleb's group, and then we'll conclude with Edna's document that we've now talked up so much. I know we won't be disappointed, but anyone from our group that wants to share?
I've seen Edna's tool, and so it goes along with this a little bit. But I think on Edna's tool, there isn't that table that we all saw today that is kind of the grant outline. And personally, I don't think we need to see that as our function and kind of our call to action as this council. We don't really need to know the inner workings of the funding stream. We've got a third-party evaluator, we've got KDE staff, we've got KnowledgeWorks, and they can hold us accountable to how we're being funded for this project. What's important to me is what's on Edna's sheet, which is how are those 10 big ideas happening through 3 subcommittees.
Thanks, Brooke. Anyone else from our group? All right, Caleb, did your group have anything to add?
Yeah, we talked about, and I'll invite my fellow group members to please feel free to add on to what I have to say. And I am fortunate here to have a few notes that I took as we talked. We talked about how there seemed to be a common theme of relationship and trust across the future state visions detailed in the report. And I brought to attention the necessity of ensuring that we don't think of people as just statistics, because I remember, quite a while ago, that was a recurring thought for me as we worked to create the report. And I think that comes from a place of our students, desiring to feel empowered and desiring to feel as though they are viewed as more than their test score. So I continually come back to that. And again, to summarize, our discussion really focused on relationships and trust. So if anyone else would like to add to that, though, I invite you to.
Hey, Edna, the moment has arrived.
And I will say just briefly, I'm sorry to interrupt there. Julie had said in the chat that students and parents want to belong, and I think that's a critical element here as well. And then we could get into a whole nother conversation about community and culture and how we can craft a statewide culture around this work. But we will save that for future conversations, because again, we can have a very lengthy conversation about our thoughts there. So thank you all.
So Caleb contacted me when I was enjoying the red tide in Western Florida. We got back together, and I knew he wanted me to think about how to facilitate these, looking at the 10 visions and where we are now. And spreadsheets always help me to see how things kind of fit together. So I'm going to share my screen and show you what I have here. Can you all see that? All you see is a blank screen, right?
Right. Yes, there is a blank.
Yeah. Well, let me scroll down here. So here are the 10 visions and a little description. This is straight from the United We Learn report. And then across the top, we have, let me scroll down, in blue are the three committees, our three committees that we have happening right now, our standing committees. Above that in the green are things that I pulled from the United We Learn website. So there, three of them seem to coincide with the three committees that we have. But the other three, for students, for communities and families, for educators, felt like they kind of were across all of those committees, or that they should be on the top of the minds of all of the committees. I'm not sure when let me make it smaller. How do I do that? There we go. So you can get a better picture of how this is put together. And so then we have all the cells here. So we started working on it, and Renee said, well, number one, we envision where we all work together, and we have a not just random things happening, but things happening in concert with each other. And so our comment then was that it was more of a learning question, or how do we address policy change in a way that builds the capacity, the synergy, and the coordination of the local communities who are working on their L3s. So there's not a lot of random things happening across the state, but there's synergy amongst all those things. So that is a piece that we need to have in our forefront of our mind as we work. And then the other committees could also look at this and say, you know, what are we doing? And then we can look for holes. Are there things that we're not doing that we should be doing? And that's where I'm a little bit not sure if these should be, the three things at the top should be their own columns, because as I was saying to the small group that we were in, this globally, we have an idea of what educators should do, but in terms of policy, after having worked in teacher ed for so many years, there are policies that we answer to a lot of people. We answer to KDE, we answer to EPSB, we answer to CPE. And sometimes those policies actually get in the way of advancing. For example, one that's happening right now is this whole idea around recruiting teachers and retaining them. And we have lost almost all of our graduate students at Morehead State University. If we could create a program where our undergraduates could begin their graduate program, take a seminar as they're doing their student teaching, but get graduate credit for it, they then would be introduced to this idea of getting graduate credit, and they start taking a step towards that. And then in their freshman year, they could, I mean, not in their first year of teaching, they would be like doing an internship, and they would be taking seminars, graduate seminars at the same time. Point is that CPE says we can't do that because you can't have any graduate credit on your undergraduate degree plan. It doesn't really have to be on the degree plan, and so it's this idea that there are one person saying one thing and another group is saying another. And I'm not sure that would show up on this the way.
And to add to that, that goes to the point of us not working in isolation. And I'm not sure if there's anyone on the United We Learn Council that represents the legislative body, like Representative Tipton, that's a proponent of this House Bill 319, and Dr. Shack, what you just said needs to at least be considered when we talk about a way to bring others and grow our profession. And another thing, I was talking, about these exit interviews, like we talk about telling your story. So I'm like, well, hey, we have this bill that talks about exit interviews. And the member of the public just said, well, when you're ready to leave, You just want to leave. You don't want to stick around and tell somebody, okay, why you're leaving. You're just so far gone at that point. So what about stay interviews to talk about what would make you stay instead of leaving at all?
Interesting.
Oh, got dark all of a sudden.
So that was my way of wrapping around that form, that template or tool was my way of wrapping my head around what Caleb had asked me to help facilitate today. And I think the small group I was in felt it was helpful. We didn't get very far on it, but it's sort of something that we could do, as Lillian suggested, asynchronously, and the other committees might be able to jump in there as well. But, you know, I don't care whether everybody wants to use it or not, but if it helps you, then
Thank
so
you. Yeah, no, thank you so much. And I'm very excited to see it. And I think that idea of creating a culture within the education community in Kentucky where, you know, different factions, I suppose, are working together around innovation and around other big ideas within United We Learn. It's critically important. And so I'm excited to see this document and to, yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to make use of it.
good. Thanks. I would have shared with you earlier, Caleb, but I finished it at 5 minutes to 5.
You sound like me a lot of the time. I understand. Good. Good.
I'm curious if others think that it would be valuable for us to send the link, you know, for folks to populate asynchronously between this and to share with the other committees to see if they might want to do a similar exercise. I mean, I know I don't want to create more work for folks, but we have heard a lot about really the need for a crosswalk like this. So curious what you guys think about that. Yeah.
I like, when I hear crosswalk, I think of a third table. And I think what I'm saying is that you're filing the 10 inside the 3. So before we send it out, I just want to make sure we're not creating yet another table to go by. So I don't know which way we're talking about it, but those are 2 different instructions for me.
Can you tell a little bit more about that, Brooke?
So the way you've got it laid out right now is like this. So I mean, are you actually wanting to populate in the middle how these tables merge? Because from my understanding, the 10 became the 3. So we just need to kind of show how those 10 can be subcategories of the 3. And then we can kind of all work within those 3 categories. I worry it's going to get really complicated if we're going to add like a 20 box matrix that we're all trying to go by, and then everything's got 3 layers of communities, families, and teachers.
Yeah.
That's going to be a hard map to follow.
I agree. Mm-hmm.
So Brooke, do you think if the exercise is to populate the matrix as it stands with the 10 ideas against the 3 committees with the lens of, are we covering the 10 elements underneath the 3 committees? And what does that look like? Does that feel like an okay first step? And then we package it in a cleaner way to show really the 3 ideas, ultimately, the 3 ideas, the 3 committees. And then we have the clarity for our committee of what that means for our charge underneath that, pulling from what was in the matrix that was populated.
I think so.
Okay.
Maybe just
I think so. So for example, go from random acts of improvement to common visions, deep partnerships, and shared responsibility. Who's doing that? The Accelerating Innovation Committee, our committee, or the Vibrant Learning Experiences? Or are all of us, are we are we trying to go from random acts of improvement to common visions through those three things? I'm not really sure which one's a framework for which one. And so who's charged with going from random acts? And if we really need to do, if the mission really is to do all 10 of those things through the 3 committees and then across 3 audiences, then we need to just attack one this year. If we're trying to go do all 10 of those in all 6 of those ways, then we don't need to go through all 10 of those this year. And it sounds like we're most aligned with number 9. So if that's what we are, then I think we just call it and we say, that's what we are. We're doing number 9 this year. And we're not looking at the other 9 in this committee.
Yeah, actually, Brooke, that's what I brought up in our group when we were talking. It's like, let's do one really well and not spread ourselves too thin.
I'd like to ask, I think that's a really good point that I just don't want us to lose the other 9. But I'd like to ask a question about how did we get from the 10 to the 3? Did somebody already do this work of looking at the 10 and saying, oh, okay, we'll put these together, these together, these together, and we get these 3 committees?
Meredith, do you know the answer to that?
I do. Words are formulating. So I don't think that it was that intentional of an alignment. I think that as we have been talking about this work, in particular, Dr. Glass, who started the conversation in a lot of different spaces, talking about the report, pointing to the outcomes of the coalition. I think he found that the 10, it was hard for people to really wrap their heads around. And so he has said language like they can basically be summarized as 3 big ideas. And so, here are the themes that sort of emerged from the 10. There is not a space that I know of where we have each of these vision statements slots under, these big ideas, this, explicitly. So I think it is needed, especially to honor the work that went into developing the report, right? Because that is sort of the foundation of United We Learn, right? Is that this is what the people of Kentucky have said they wanted. So we certainly hear you, and that's a conversation that we've had as well. But to answer your question, no, I don't think it was sort of an intentional culling, as it was just sort of like it organically happened as he was sort of talking about the 10 vision statements.
That makes sense because people can't hold 10 things in their head at one time.
That's right. That's right. And I think as we've been talking about it in sort of a space of sort of onboarding people, right? Like it's these 3 big ideas. That's the right type of language that we need, right? To sort of get people in the door. But when we're in this phase of sort of like, what does this look like to implement? It's important that we don't lose the meatier piece of this, right? Like the actual depth of the work too. So I think that's kind of to Brooke's point, we are trying to, those of us who are helping to facilitate this work, reconciling what's the right balance of information to provide to all the members to make sure that people feel like they're informed and can make recommendations that are based on the wealth of knowledge that we have, right? Because we want people who are in the council to have access to as much information as we can provide, because that will make their participation fuller. But that also runs the risk that we are overwhelming people with all the details, right? And so we're trying to find that balance, not always successfully.
So maybe it's just enough that we all are aware of those 10 items. And maybe we personally revisit them periodically and say, okay, am I keeping this in mind as we're doing our work? and ask questions around that when we have our meetings. It might be a distractor to get too much down in the weeds. I really appreciate Brooke's comments, and I love working with Brooke. We seem to be working a lot together these days, but it's always a back and forth, and it's great. So yeah, I mean, the tool helped me to see some things that I had in my head a little bit, but maybe we don't need to get so down in the weeds on it.
Yeah.
I wonder if it would be helpful. You know, sometimes when you have different kind of meetings, you go over the norms at the beginning of every meeting, or you talk about what the vision is of every meeting. Maybe it would be helpful just to read those 10 statements, or make a commitment to read those 10 statements before the meeting, or we share them as a one-pager at the beginning of the meeting, so that we just all remember, oh yeah, I can't forget that I'm also thinking about inequity, and I can't forget that I'm also thinking about people.
Yeah, Jenny, I love that idea. And I'm having some synergy moment over here too with you, in that, you know, our next time together, we will be bringing the opportunity analysis resource to this group, again, purely as a starting place to help you guys ideate, right, as you're building a policy agenda for this work. But it's going to be absolutely critical that we center these 10 visions as we think about what the policy agenda is going to be. So I think we can be really, really smart about how we structure our time together, so that it starts with these visions, like you just articulated, and we use that as a through line to then start considering what some of the policy steps might be. So I might suggest that might be a next step, that we bring it forward in that way and test that idea. And then, you know, Edna, to your point, maybe there's a way to reflect after that meeting and where we've gone, and then maybe revisit this tool just as a second to say, is there value in going forward and populating this, or do we feel like we have some clarity of direction in the policy agenda that we've built, that we know now we have enough alignment across these 10 ideas?
I would defer to our chair.
I'll say that I think that there's a lot of room for conversation here around this, and thinking about as we move forward. And in April, we will have our opportunity analysis to look at and to dive into. To be truthful, though, I'm not exactly sure where to go with this, right? I do like the idea of centering our thoughts around the 10 visions, and ensuring that we are thinking about what it is that Kentuckians want of and for our education system. But I think there's a lot of room for conversation, and we could continue in this conversation for quite a while, right? About our thoughts on the 10 visions, the 3 big ideas. Yeah, to be honest, I'm not exactly sure where to go next, and I think it's critical that that all of you have a say in how we go about that in the next steps.
So Lillian, do you think it might be helpful, just we maybe hit that wall where that Brooke was sort of saying we sometimes hit, where too much information, too much for us to process, and that maybe it would be good for us to draft some scenarios of ways we could move forward and give it in a written format for people to sort of think on, rather than trying to think through all of those possible paths in this space right now, if that's okay. So maybe Edna will pull you in on that email chain as we're sort of thinking. I know that we have a meeting scheduled soon, so we'll try to get that to everyone with enough time to really engage with it before our next virtual meeting in, well, actually we don't have another meeting until the convening. So we have 2 months to think about how we want to engage. So we'll maybe do that via email if everyone thinks that's appropriate. I prefer to be able to read and then reread and then read one more time for good measure before I make a decision on things.
I'm the same way, actually. I too prefer to have the opportunity to really think through different options and to weigh those and to consider that in that way. So Dr. Brewer, I think your plan is a good one.
I put the link to that tool in the chat box. If anybody wants to look at it, they can. No obligation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So just to clarify here and ensure we're on the same page, we will work on drafting an email and laying out possible scenarios, send that out to our committee members, and allow for some think time about the direction we would like to head next. So is there anything you would like to add, Dr. Brewer, or anyone else?
I think that's perfect and a great way to transition to member updates.
Great, absolutely. Yeah, so if anyone has any news they would like to share with our group, any updates, maybe you have questions, and it's possible you have lots of them. And so the floor is open right now.
Lillian, did you have an update that you wanted to share?
Yeah, I was purposely sitting silent in case others wanted to jump in. I probably should have shared this earlier when talking about the public will building and advocacy work, but didn't want to jump the gun and wanted to make sure it was okay to share and have checked back. So as I mentioned, that work will be entirely led by Kentucky organizations, and we have secured the commitment of 2 organizations in Kentucky to really be the co-leaders of helping orchestrate that strategy and identifying the organizations to pull in to this effort and be part of it. And so we're really excited that the Pritchard Committee and the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce have agreed to play that role, which is extraordinary, really, really exciting work. So grateful to them, and they will have a lot more to share coming forward in that.
Thank you. And I'm curious if anyone else has any other thoughts to share with the group this evening.
I just want to say one more reminder that if you are interested in serving as either the chair or vice chair for the full Cool Council, those nominations are due March 10th. So you can nominate yourself or you can nominate one of your amazing committee co-members if you would like to do that. But we do need to have those nominations in place so that we can gather all the appropriate information so that voting can commence before the convening in April. So if you would like to have a leadership role in the Cool Council, perhaps you are one of those people that likes a lot of information. This is one way to really get access to that, because you will add a few extra meetings with all of us to your plate. So if that is you, nominate yourself and we'd love to have you.
All right. Well, thank you, Mayor or Dr. Brewer. I'm excited about the direction that we're heading, and looking forward to our upcoming convening. So if there are no other comments this evening, we'll go ahead and we will plan to adjourn our meeting. So again, I look forward to seeing you all here soon. And I'm very thankful that all of you were here with us this evening. And I'm very grateful to be in this space with you and very thankful to be serving as chair of such a wonderful standing committee. So thank you all for all that you do and for believing in this work. I'm very excited about what lies ahead. So with that said, at 6:30, we adjourn.